joining me in today's video. Sorry if there was a little pause at the beginning, I'm not sure. This is done live, and I always never know how those beginnings go. I figured it was a good time to present in, I decided, a live stream form, sort of my thoughts that I almost made into a little video essay about a particular cultural phenomenon that I think is negative and reasons why it occurs, but reasons, several different ones, why I think it's bad as well, related to art and media losing their originality over time, with ongoing series or series of TV shows or games or whatever. And our primary example, and the reason why I'm discussing this now, is because a big particular announcement happened in the world of a game I happen to follow, which is Magic the Gathering, or Magic Cards. The designers or creators recently announced something big that unfortunately means they have cemented themselves as going down a path that is representative of this cultural phenomenon I'm discussing. And the phenomenon itself mostly relates to when media over time begins doing something that I've heard nicknamed Fortnitification, where somewhat like the video game Fortnite, which let me pull open some images of things here, the media of various sorts will often fill itself with a world of characters and or locations and or items or so on that are actually not their original media, but something that either is popular from some other form of media or to some degree maybe a cultural staple or cultural trope. And in a game like that, like in Fortnite, you wouldn't be surprised if you see like SpongeBob is a playable character. And it does turn out that they are going to make magic cards that have SpongeBob in them as well. And these relate to many reasons why a company would end up doing something like that. But also, I have a whole family of reasons why I think if you have a game, or just as a consumer of media, your opinion, but extra if you make a game, why it's not as good over time to Fortniteify your game. And I want to show the example, since I happen to know this game a bit, of Magic the Gathering, of sort of being at a pivotal turning point right now where they have cemented themselves as becoming Fortniteified. Another term that came to mind when I was thinking of this concept is over amalgamation. When you amalgamate things together, this can be done too far or in the wrong ways. And I wanted to mention that so there wasn't a long hook while I was just setting it up, this topic and then that topic. But now I want to jump back a bit and look at a non Fortniteified version of a game I like, Magic the Gathering, and see what has happened with the lead up to and then recent big announcement related to what sorts of characters, for example, may be included on a card. Now, I've always liked card games with different characters of sorts and different things, and I plan on designing some card games of my own. There's one I might actually try and get printed and made this year, but that one is more so a mathematical game to test your mathematical skills or as a teaching device or a fun game if you like numbers. Whereas I do have other games I'm slowly brainstorming that involve a bit more lore and deeper rule sets. And as a kid, even, I would make all sorts of different cards. And me and some of my friends were inspired by these Pokemon cards that we had just a few of, some of which we just like found on the ground somewhere. And we didn't know how the Pokemon game worked. Oh, hey, Sassafras. One of the cats is here. We didn't know how this game Pokemon worked. And we just thought it was cool that there were these different characters with some sort of rules on the cards. And so we would design our own cards. And my mom was a graphic designer, so she had all these random business cards that were like test examples she had made for people, or extras when she had made designed business cards for people or whatever. So we would often do them on the non-print side of a business card. And I would have all sorts of different cards with these different abilities. And at first, they would just sort of have different points of different things, and I had all sorts of games that are hard to figure out exactly what the rules were. But these cards in particular, you'd make a deck, or you'd just play from some pre-constructed deck, and you'd have different characters. And for example, here is a guy called Licky Polly. It's like a roly-poly that licks, maybe, or something, and it says 50, because it's worth 50. And some of the things I would do were based on culture I knew. Like, this guy was a Beanie Baby I had. This was based on. And other ones, the most fun ones, or interesting ones, were just based on little worlds I came up with in my head, little random characters I created. This one's Spikosaur. And they evolved more complicated rules. At first they were really simple, and then you get to more complicated ones. Oh, this one's some sort of code or cipher. This is like some weird code or cipher. But as some of these would grow to become pretty inspired by Magic cards. This one is very, if you know Magic, is very obviously inspired by Magic's format and rule set and stuff like that. That was the first card game that I got into playing on a big scale. And then for many years I didn't play it. In like high school at some point I stopped playing it until like a year or two ago. I still haven't really played it or bought any cards or anything like that, and don't really plan on doing that much, although maybe I'll just buy enough cards to make like one deck so I could play it occasionally. But I've just been into researching it and looking up like all the things that happened over the years, which cards were printed and stuff. And I did even make an episode on my Combo Class channel about the best Magic cards of all time, like calculating the strongest ones. And there is going to be another episode this grade that's going to be about calculating the weakest, the worst cards of all time. I swear, whether or not you like the game, watch that episode. It'll be interesting. Anyway, here, I actually brought some of these. One sec. I have some here that a surprise prop. Uh-oh, I'm ripping the box they're in. Anyway, this is a box of Magic cards I have left. A lot of the old Magic cards I had, I shared collections with friends. Some of them, in the years we didn't play, gave them away to kids. Other ones of them I've just traded away or whatever at some point in the past. These ones are kind of damaged, but I might do a draft with some of them with my friends sometime. And none of these are the strongest cards I had, because a lot of them, one of my friends who I shared collections with had in these decks, that some of these decks might be in my attic somewhere. But as far as we remember, he gave some to some kids in the years we weren't playing, which is okay. You know, the kids probably had fun with it. And some of these were given to me from someone else. So, you know, it's only fair. But these, I do still have enough to use as good examples of props. Of course, people are going to ask, oh, do you have any really expensive ones? Because I used to play back in the day, and some of them are really valuable. I was a kid trading away my cards, even apart from some of the decks being given away. I was a kid trading my cards, so I bet I traded away the really good ones, because it's hard to judge which cards are actually the best. I probably traded them away way back in the day when I would go to Friday Night Magics. So none of these are super strong. I tried to look up some that looked rarer, and there were a few I found that were like $5. I set those aside. So I need to look through for more that might be like $5 in case I ever want to cash those in somehow. But most of these are not super strong. I got a lot of them from playing what are called drafts, where you open packs with a group of people and rotate them and stuff. Anyway, the main reason I'll be analyzing this game in other videos is because it has really cool strategy as far as you build a deck, and which cards you include in your deck is a very strategic, interesting thing. But in this video, it's a little different. It's about the lore and the flavor of a game like this. Look at all these worlds that were there, characters they came up with, and locations. And here, this is a world called Mirrodin, where a lot of artifact-related things happened. Even this one that's not an artifact pictures that in related to its name and art and stuff. And this one as well relates to artifacts, although the art is a little less like it. And so that set had that flavor of this artifact world. And going back to this backdrop, here is an example. I'm going to go through more examples on this site called Scryfall that catalogs them really well and has a sort of Boolean-esque search function that's really neat when I'm researching videos that I want to make about Magic someday. You use that to be like, what are all the cards that say on their thing flying, but their name doesn't include this, but they're from this range of years, or you can do all sorts of combos of stuff. So here, though, I just have all the cards in this set, and it auto has them sorted by color. But this is like an artifacty world. Even beyond the cards, I got books, and there were books for all of these worlds of Magic, novels. And one of the things that I think has transitioned is I don't think they print novels of Magic anymore. They write some online stories about it, but I'm not sure if they print novels for it anymore. And so these novels were whole fantasy worlds, and you could see them through the cards. They have art, names, and they have flavor text on a lot of them that tells these stories. And that was an artifacty world, but you also just had other ones. Here was a different sort of fantastical world that they had created, full of characters and locations that they had books about, but really, most people only got that story through the cards. The cards themselves carried this flavor, sort of. And here is now, as we've evolved over the years, there's two problems, one of which is a drastic shift, and one of which is just like an evolving problem. The evolving problem is some of the recent sets have leaned pretty heavily on too on-the-nose versions of tropes from culture. They're like, here is a detective set, so the characters are just going to be, we're going to stick all of the main characters in there, and they're going to be wearing detective hats and stuff. Here is a, cowboyish set, so we're just going to have all the main characters in the desert with cowboy hats and horse-like things. So they've leaned a little too on the nose with tropes on some sets, but it is still usually worlds they've created, and some of the sets aren't as far like that. Some of them still are fully this world. But you could already tell there's some problem building with the game when, instead of evolving their world and their characters in a somewhat more natural way like they used to, they started having these planeswalker characters that were like the main characters that they wanted to practically make merch of and stuff. They're like, these are these, good-looking humanoid main characters, and whatever new world we go to, those guys are going to show up. Instead of it being like if you're on some other foreign planet really far away, you'd probably have your own set of characters. So already it's not great for a game to go down the path of evolving where you need this sort of Marvel movie-esque main character squad who always shows up to save the day. If your previous lore involved sort of this weird world and then that weird world near it and things that were linked in more subtle ways. But that's not the big shift. The big shift is that they started printing this thing called Universes Beyond. Well, this isn't even the biggest shift. First, they started printing this. They started printing first ones that were like, here are already existent cards that also were printed in an in-game fashion, in-universe fashion, that then also were given another name. They even did this for some celebrities, which is a little weird, that Post Malone had his version of a card. But at least in that case, his card was a version of another card, and it says on the card, like in tournaments, it's actually this other card. You get a version that on top it's like, AKA my name. But it doesn't really change the rules in any sense, because if you didn't like that, you could play with the version that wasn't that. But now, over time, they began making with some of these secret layers, that these are things they made Magic cards of. It began getting, and these are the ones where we have sets instead of secret layers. They began putting ones that started being mechanically unique. Cards that were not printed with an in-universe version. That were only printed in whatever lore is here. Now, as this has continued, at first some players were like, this is not great because I might have to play with someone who's using that, but also if they became good enough and they were legal in some format of playing of the game that I do, then it would feel like I don't want a scenario where either I have to make my deck worse or to maximally construct the deck as good as I can, I have to use a SpongeBob card. Maybe you don't want that. Maybe you want your deck to feel like I have an elf deck, or I have a goblin deck, or I have a deck that feels like using lands from the forest. And you don't want SpongeBob in there. But you also don't want to make your deck non-maximally constructed. Also, you play with other people who are going to be playing cards. You know, it's also not as fun maybe if you want to imagine your elf deck fighting some other army if you lose to SpongeBob. As opposed to the other armies previously having come from the same similar worlds in their universe. Now, here's the big one. They announced, do I have this somewhere? I thought I had a tab for this somewhere. Whatever, I'll just describe it. They announced that now these are going to be legal in pretty much all the formats. That the Universes Beyond ones that they're going to start printing going forward, like there's a Spider-Man set coming out. The Spider-Man set is going to be legal in all the main formats, meaning that it will already be at the point where you're going to have to pick if Spider-Man's good enough, and the Spider-Man IPA people are going to be like, come on, make Spider-Man a really good card. We want him to be powerful. We want to sell the set for that. And we want people to think Spider-Man's powerful and buy more of them. Then you'd be at the point. It's, after trying this enough, one of the Spider-Man-esque characters is going to be one where you have to put it in your deck whether or not you want to because it's so good. Cards evolve and have this power creep to degrees. Not completely, and I'll discuss that in my worst ever Magic cards episode I'll make before too long. But there is some power creep in some card types getting better over time. And particularly the card type creatures does that in Magic. But that means that it's not going to be very surprising if one of these characters that they're already going to be pushed by the IPA holders to include, whatever Spider-Man or SpongeBob, is gonna be so good that you gotta put it in a lot of decks and you're gonna be meeting it in a lot of playing other people matches. Now, there are a lot of other examples of this being done better or worse. For example, like a version that I've heard do it a little better, I don't know as much about this, but I used to play some of these as a kid, is the Super Smash Bros. Games. These do include a cast of sort of Fortnite-ified characters, but they're more selective with which ones they put in. They only add them here or there. It takes some time, and then they try and have this sort of full squad of ones, returning characters in each case. Whereas here, when they make Spider-Man, they're only going to print more Spider-Man cards if they decide to make another monetary deal with whoever owns the Spider-Man copyrights or whatever. And so, what are some problems with when games do this? Well, let's see. I'm just going to go to myself for a minute, but then I'll go back to that when needed. There are numerous problems with this. First of all, your game may have built itself with a unique lore and flavor that characters like I was describing, an elf deck or goblin deck or etc. And maybe characters will not like the lore and flavor getting polluted. But that's just the tip of the iceberg of reasons I think this is a bad idea. So there's, for one, you are now tied to this company maintaining relevance and staying in the good grace of the public. What if there comes a time when some creator of Spider-Man or actor or something does something really offensive in pop culture and people associate the character Spider-Man with something bad? You can't remove it from your game. It's a card in your game. You can try and ban it, but then players who already had to put it in their deck will be annoyed. And they try not to ban cards, so it'll be even worse if they have to start banning every Spider-Man and SpongeBob here. So another reason is that, so just to clarify that, as these other companies evolve, you are hoping that every single other company, you're not just caring about your own game's trajectory, every single other pop culture company and franchise you tie in, you now are hoping that they maintain relevance and being seen as a good thing in the public cultural conscience, and not like the culture doesn't see them as a metaphor for something bad, which can happen with some characters of things over time. Now, also, what if it does well? You can only continue making this. You cannot return to the world unless you sign another monetary deal with that company. Maybe the company changes hands. Maybe they want more money next time. Maybe that won't work. So unless all the deals go correct, it's a one and done. And then maybe your game will seem like, okay, we keep returning to universes over time to paint this bigger collage, except the one time we saw Spider-Man, and the one time we saw SpongeBob, and the one time we saw these other ones. Those are a few other reasons, and there were many reasons. That's just sort of still the tip of the iceberg of reasons why I think that this doesn't make sense for companies to do, or will be bad for themselves over time. Now, what it also does is you are making your thing good by taking the easy route of copying something that you already think culture thinks is good. By taking all of its tropes, all of its catchphrases, all of its character design, and legally through some deal, but having all of something else that culture has decided is good. So if every game does this, every game's going to be the same. It's turning your game, not only watering down your lore, but also just steering yourself into feeling more similar to any other competitor that does the same thing. How are we going to distinguish Magic the Gathering and another card game like, I think it's called Hearthstone? How are we going to distinguish those if they both start having Spider-Man cards as opposed to having their own worlds? And I mean, we'll distinguish them probably. You could know if you learned, oh yeah, they look like that and they look like that, but they're going to feel the same. You're going to lose your original flavor. Now also, let's say it works really well and you're not able to return to it because you can't sign that other deal with the company in the future. Then it'll feel weird going back to your old lore. Once you've gone on that road, it's gonna feel weird to steer yourself back if you ever quit this. If you're ever like, didn't work out well, we're not gonna do Spider-Man and SpongeBob sets, then it's gonna feel like abrupt no matter how you do that, even if you try and trickle them out, that it's like, okay, never mind guys, we're back to just a fantasy world. Then there's going to just be this period in the game's history that as the game continues, the period will be a smaller and smaller percent that does that. So when you decide this, you're kind of deciding I'm going to have a weird blip in my game's history or I'm doing this forever. And so, because the goal of formats like this in Magic cards is to expand card pools. Many formats are like all the cards after this date are legal, or all the cards except for this ban list are legal. I mean, you have limits, like you can use up to 4 of each card unless it's a basic land and stuff like that. But it's supposed to expand the card pool. It'd be really weird if this doesn't work out to cut out that giant amount of the card pool and say, never mind, whoops, they're not legal in the formats now. players would have to completely readjust their decks a second time. And maybe some players bought the Spider-Man card for their deck and would be mad for that reason. Players don't like when a card gets banned often, unless it's like so obviously overpowered, because they might, have bought that or gotten it, and now it's like worthless if it's banned in their favorite format. So now I'm going to look through some comments before I mention some other things that come to mind with this being bad. One thing to note is, why do the companies do this? It makes money and it brings in new fans, but you can't only want to bring in new fans at risk of isolating the entire fan base you've built. Magic is lucky that it's maintained relevance and gone from not just the first card game of that type, but become still maybe the most relevant of that type, or maybe tied with one or two others for most relevant. And so it's sort of lucky and in a skilled way to get there, but does require some luck also. And they're taking a huge risk in a way by saying sort of to all the fan base that is standing behind them and making them sell enough products to have so many sets and so many employees, by telling all those people, we don't care if you're annoyed, because we're going to hope that new customers are enough. And also, what if the new customers don't like the game of Magic as a whole? Maybe they only end up liking that one deck that they can make from the character they liked. I don't think you're going to necessarily have a huge success rate at converting people who buy one deck because their favorite character's in it to getting super into Magic, especially if all the other sets are just other franchises. It's going to be practically luck if the person who buys this set also likes the franchise from the next one. They're based on very random things, like Spider-Man is one of the more popular ones, but here they are, and some that make more sense are like Lord of the Rings. That one sort of makes more sense. But they have like all sorts of things. Street Fighter, that's a video game. Stranger Things, that's a TV show. The Walking Dead is a TV show. Some of those were ones that were just versions of in-universe cards, but it's an example of the type of thing they're switching to. And at the time that they noted that they're legal in all these formats, they also noted 50% of Magic cards are going to be this going forward. 50% of the sets they're going to make are going to be this Universes Beyond. So if you don't like it, half of the stuff coming out you have to find a way to ignore. Players who want to just play the non-Universes Beyond not only have to hope no cards that fit their deck and are overpowered like that come out, or have to hope they never play someone else who's playing it, which is an absurdist hope, but also, yeah, a lot of issues there. Let me look through the comments real quick, and feel free to leave any thoughts that you folks have of any reasons this is good or bad. But I will say the main reason they do it is money, and they've admitted so much, which is nice that they at least admit it. But when asked why they do it, their response is, it's been selling very well so far. So far, it's worked well. They've sold a lot of them. We don't know yet what good conversion rate that has or not, how many of those players will stick around in the game. But so far, it's worked really well. But I feel like they're going to run out of IPAs to make really easy deals with that are going to work well. Like, they've done their Lord of the Rings, they've done some of the popular ones that fit it well. And so are they just going to, get to the point where they're using like B-tier cultural shows and icons and things, like some random video game or show that not that many people know? Because how is this going to work? Are they hoping that they're going to be able to renegotiate these deals all again? Or it seems like once they do one, they're ready to move on. And there aren't an infinite amount of franchises that can be made into a Magic card that general people will be familiar with. They're printing out a ton. They also announced along with this, they're upping in general the amount of stuff they're printing. And they probably thought, hopefully that will make the old players not mad, because they're still getting a ton of sets that aren't the Universes Beyond, and another ton that is. But now some players think, from what I've read, that it's too much to keep up with. That if they want to play in a format and they want their deck to stay up to date, they now have to check every month or two if a new set came out. And then they have to be like 50-50 if it's one that they care about or not, potentially. Like, let's say that you don't want to include any Universes Beyond sets unless it's a franchise that you like or that you think fits Magic really well. Well, then, even if half of the Universes Beyond fit that criteria, you're still going to have to ignore a quarter of all sets because they're making it half of all sets. My prediction is it's going to backfire and they're going to lessen how many they do, but it's stuck in the game unless they do a huge banning spree. It's stuck in the game. So, they literally do have some planned that are based on SpongeBob, and for now, from what I've read, those seem like they're just going to be SpongeBob versions of pre-existing in-universe cards. However, it shows the type of character they're willing to use. So I would not be surprised if they have ones that are original actual cards from SpongeBob in the future, or similar things to that, which I, in fact, even like SpongeBob. I think the early few seasons of SpongeBob are really funny. I think that the first season, like 1 through 3 of SpongeBob, is really funny. But it doesn't fit a Magic card. So you can't take anything that's good in some way and stick it in a Magic card. And especially with something that just doesn't have like a fantasy vibe, because they spent so many years building a fan base around this fantasy vibe. So, like, that's why I say Lord of the Rings fits a lot better than some of the others. Now, before I will get to the comments soon, but leave your thoughts for now. And one more thing I want to note before that is some players argue that, well, one of the first Magic sets ever is called Arabian Nights. This was sort of based on a cultural thing. It was based on the story, 1001 Arabian Nights. Not all of the set was, but some cards were. And the thing is, that's a really old cultural staple that if you wanted to revisit, you could. You don't have to spend money. It's like public domain to revisit that. Also, it fits the fantasy vibe more. Also, it's more proven to probably remain in long-term public consciousness, long-term public awareness, than some random IPAs might be from nowadays. And also, it's sort of closer in vagueness to like some cultural things, like witches are in a way a cultural trope. This is based on a book or a tale of some sort, or maybe 1001 tales. So this is a little different, but it's closer to the end of being like a witch or something, which Magic is okay from the very beginning, including things that are, cultural tropes like that. A lot different than using something that came out just a few years ago. Some of the ones they've made are really new, or IPs? Maybe I'm calling them IPAs. What's it called? An IP, I guess. What does that even stand for? Intellectual property, I think, something like that. But yeah, so when you're making something based on something really new, you don't have a big sample size for whether this will stay in the public awareness and whether it'll age well. Some cultural things age really poorly. What if some of these are based on a specific TV show, not like Spider-Man is sort of a long-term thing with a lot of things based on it, so it's not one of the worst examples. Some are based on a particular TV show or video game, and it's like, what if they come out with a new season that's, I don't know, like really racist or something? You have that card stuck in your game. Some things do not age on the perfect trajectory you hope for. And so now, whenever you do this as a company, you're taking it from one path you have to make sure goes clearly, your own path, to hoping that all of these other paths work out well too. And I just can't imagine it's different with my videos because those are sort of inherently like references to cultural things often. Like they have sort of a YouTube style, and a lot of mathematics makes sense to show and quote other people's diagrams and stuff. So, like my videos are a little different, but with the books I write, for example, that I hope to publish someday with my fantasy books, they're not fantasy really fully, but with my own sort of world in my books that, you know, a fantastical world, meaning it's not the real world. And I mean, it's closest to like a real world, but it's not actually happening. It's nonfiction. Those I can't imagine ever putting someone else's character in. Now, what are other things this happens in? You can see this in TV shows. Love doing crossovers more and more over the years. A crossover episode. And sometimes the crossover episode just breaks the lore, just like doesn't fit in or make sense. And you could see this in, I don't know, a lot of other places. Some will come to mind, but let me know if you can think of anywhere else you've observed this. Now let me go through some comments. Someone said they love, thank you, MTG Monkey. They love the videos. Didn't know I live streamed. Yeah, I used to live stream like twice a week. Now I live stream about once a week, or recently maybe it's only been every other week or so. But usually it's about once a week. And yeah, that's something I do for fun from time to time, depending on the topic. Some topics I know work better for me to rant about them for a while and maybe show the internet in the background or whatever. So those are my live stream ones. And we have a note from them that I should play Commander. That's possible. If I did design another Magic deck, which I actually have designed Magic decks for fun in my notes. But I don't know if I would get any of them because I would have to make more budget versions of them. Like some cards are expensive. So I would have to go through my notes and see which one like was affordable. To get a whole deck, I would want to get a really budget one that was under $100, but that's hard to do with certain types of deck because of how much certain cards are. So it's not something I'm going to spend money on anytime in the near future. I'm just going to do a draft with these with my friends, but maybe sometime in the distant future I would get a deck. I'm more interested in playing Modern, which is another format, which is a 60 card format where you can use up to 4 cards and it's 1v1, as opposed to Commander is multiplayer, 100 card decks, 1 of each card, and slightly different rules. And so I would try Commander sometime maybe, but the type I was used to playing back in the day, the kitchen table Magic I would play, was closer to Vintage because we didn't really have any restrictions in my friend group. And I forget how I did it at Friday Night Magic when I brought decks. I often drafted when I would go to a Friday Night Magic, but with my friends it was pretty casual. But what I would probably be interested in Modern, maybe Commander, because Vintage is very expensive because it allows more cards, including the ones that are really expensive. So hello to everyone else who's commenting. We have a note about someone talking about the Doctor Who cards. Yeah, that was one of the sets that they made. I don't know if that's going to be standard and modern legal because that came out before the announcement. So I don't know if that's included in ones that join these formats or if it's only after the announcement. But yes, they're noting it's expensive. A lot of the cards got really expensive. So Wizards of the Coast is the company that owns this. And they got bought by Hasbro, which is just like a big media giant. And so Hasbro doesn't necessarily have the best interests of the game at mind. Hasbro wants to get a bunch of money out of it. They would rather have it be now, even if that affects the chance of the game surviving a long time. They're not as into having a core fan base survive or whatever. They're into profits. But the game designers at Magic are still really passionate. So there's a balance. There are many game designers at Magic who love the game still and put a lot of heart and soul into these cards. The art, names, the flavor text, the cards do. Sorry. And wait, sorry, I just need to grab some water. Okay. And so there are many people at Magic who put their heart and soul into it. And that's sort of at odds with the bigger company having monetary interests sometimes in mind. So it sucks that they're expensive. That's why I want to just draft these with friends. There's a way we can turn the cards I have into a fun experience. And another comment asking about Commander. Yeah, maybe I'll try that someday. If I ever was with a combo lord who wanted to play, I would play with whatever decks they had. I would play whatever format if they had the decks for it. And someone who used to play Magic thinks it's absurd. I don't know which part you thought is absurd, but yeah, maybe the whole thing, because it is sort of absurd. Oh, by the way, here we have a donation comment from Hank Oflamio. And thank you so much, Hank, for the donation comment. They ask if there's a mathematical way to balance a card game if we assume all the cards came out as one complete card set. Card battle game. I don't know what you mean balanced. You mean make all the cards fair? Like no cards overpowered or underpowered? I would say you can't perfectly mathematically quantify that for an interesting game. Or maybe there's a way beyond human comprehension. But I am interested in games that are so simple you can quantify in some level. Now, you could quantify theoretically all the game maths that could result from things and whether two cards, if played ideally, would result in the same odds of helping you win the game, if drawn at even odds. But that wouldn't factor in humans. Humans have different ways they react to things, so there are subjective things related to the human experience of playing a game. We don't play like perfect robots. And so the more interesting games, we can't fully do that, but they should try and do it a lot. So there are ways to somewhat do it. With Magic, for example, there's power and toughness for creatures. There's certain formulas, you could say, which I'll discuss when I make an episode about the worst Magic cards ever. That'll be on the Combo Class channel. There are certain formulas for a certain mana cost, what power and toughness you expect. What would be too good, what would need some abilities to be good but be okay, what would be really bad unless it has a bunch of abilities attached. There's sort of formulas you can use to quantify certain keywords, like how good is flying or trample. That's a bit more complicated, so it's really hard to quantify two different effects, like look at your opponent's hand, they discard a card, versus like you draw two cards. It's really hard to quantify those and all the circumstances that could occur. Theoretically, with ideal play, there is a way to mathematically do it for games. For some games, depending on the rule set of the games. So you'd need to take out randomization from the game, like the decks always came in a particular order. Players would have to somehow play perfectly ideally for the knowledge they were given. In fact, still then, it might need to be a game where you have full knowledge, where you know exactly what your opponent's deck is, exactly what's in their hand and stuff. So I'm not sure if we could do it with a game with incomplete knowledge. Stuff like that will come up more in the future, though, as we do more things about games. Check out my episode about Connect 4 if you're curious about quantifying who could win a game and whether that's quantifiable. Like if it's quantifiable that the first player always wins in what scenario. So I made an episode about Connect 4 that relates to what's called Zermelo's theorem. So, oh yeah, and someone asked, do I mean IP? What is IPA in this context? Yeah, I meant IP, intellectual property, or whatever it is. Someone notes Magic doesn't have a Charizard, which isn't a marketable identity. They did sort of force that in with their Planeswalkers, so I think that should be enough. I don't think they need to also include Spider-Man and SpongeBob. If they want, they can keep the path of making the Planeswalkers front and center in all these stories. So, and there's a lot of other cool thoughts and comments. Sorry I cannot answer all of them. To look at a few others, someone said Owlheart says they want to push back on the idea, or could push back, that Magic must be pegged to fantasy. I don't think it has to be pegged to fantasy, but I think that there are certain realms that don't make sense for it that it's drifting toward. The next set is like a racing set, and it doesn't fit the mood as much, but if you took that far enough, there are certain moods that are just certain things involving modern technology already feel weird in Magic's world. And so there's certain things that just don't fit it that well. And so it doesn't have to be. But that's what they spent so many years cultivating, and it worked well up to this point. They changed from complete old fantasy to like some sets take place on a metal like world, the artifact one, and things like that, but it's still like fantasy ish in a certain way. Someone said, did I see a Reddit post that lets you deal infinite damage to your opponent, assuming if or not the twin prime conjecture is true? I did see that. I've looked up all of the cool Reddit posts about weird math in Magic, and many of them I'll bring up in the future. There's so much cool math in Magic. I like the ones that discuss on forums, Reddit and otherwise, that discuss combos that can't deal an arbitrarily large amount of damage, but can deal like what is the most damage your combo can deal without it being able to do an arbitrarily large amount. And there are ones that the answer is larger than Graham's number, which is just absurdly big. And there's other really cool things. Magic is Turing complete, meaning it can simulate a computer, and a lot of cool stuff about the game Magic. There will be other episodes I'm going to make related to it, trickled out over time. It's not a Magic channel all of a sudden. It's just trickled out here and there. But the next one will be on the main Convo Class channel, analysis of the worst cards of all time. Trust me, it's going to be great. Someone asked, do I know if Zermelo's theorem applies to perfect information games with more than 2 players? I'm not positive. I would have to look that up. I would assume so, but I'm not positive. And they asked, similar to Blocus. Yeah, I've played that. That's a fun game. Okay, well, let me now, those are some comments. Feel free to leave any other ones, but I am going to leave a few more thoughts and then wrap up relatively soon. So, this is something that happens in a lot of games, that they go from somewhat going into like other cultural tropes to going super on the nose with certain tropes and like now here's like previews from the upcoming set. This is the racing one, and I guess these fit the world kind of. These aren't that like blatantly non-Magic feeling, but some of the stuff I heard or read about it sounded a little like a copy of Mad Max, the franchise about like races in an apocalyptic world. And it's sort of like, all right, you can do a set that's just like Magic, but Mad Max. But do you have to? Especially if that's one of the universes within ones that's now only 50% of it. So the Magic designers who do listen to some degree have said, okay, we're going to cut back on how many on-the-nose tropes we're doing. We're going to be a little lighter with it and a little more subtle with like having a giant pun in the name of the card that relates to this time it's detectives, this time it's cowboys or whatever. But they also said that sets like this are still coming out because they plan the sets a year or two in advance. So they want to update that, but it won't kick in for a year or two, or for now, a few more months or a year from now, that they'll actually be getting to the sets that they designed after they decided, okay, we should loosen up on that. However, they did not loosen up on the Universes Beyond. They're only going further. And they before insisted that they were like, there's nothing to worry about that we're doing Universes Beyond. It's not going to be a huge amount of Magic. You can just avoid it. It's going to be a tiny bit here and there. And it's not going to be legal in your favorite formats. Just ignore it. And then they inched it up to this point on a slippery slope. So there's no reason to believe that they won't next say, oh, it sold well, so now we're doing 3/4 of Magic is that. So that sold well, so now 90% of Magic's that. Until they run out of intellectual properties, to finally get the term right here, until they run out of ones they can make monetary deals with that the culture knows. Or until it already just bites them in the ass too much by using something that then goes a bad direction culturally, whatever character they threw in their game. So, to summarize some points, doing this will get you more money right away, but maybe not long term. It's a big risk for a company to do it all of a sudden if it wasn't already their identity. And you may lose your originality. You may make your flavor feel polluted. And by lose your originality, I mean start feeling similar to everything else. and also that you get your flavor polluted, that you don't have this unique story you were telling anymore, or unique world, which that's a big part of Magic to me. Maybe not to all players, but to me as a kid, the world, the story behind the cards. Now, I suppose I've looked at it a bit more mathematically the past year or two, but at least in the past, that was like what got me hooked. The world that you could learn through the characters and the cards and stuff. So you can get it in the names, the art, the flavor texts, even the abilities sometimes hint at bits of the world. So I don't recommend doing this if you make a game. It's risky, and it could just be this blip in your legacy if you decide to go and not do it anymore. It'll also be probably hard to go back in a natural way, and then you'll just have this weird blip in your legacy that, you're going to hope ages well. You're now hoping 10 different companies age well. Next year, you're hoping 20 different companies age well. That's risky. And I just imagine it's not going to end up going well in the long term. Magic has survived more than 30 years. They have done incredibly successfully. Why are they changing it up so much? They were already doing really well before this. I feel like it's pretty risky to put it up to 50% of it is this new experiment that a lot of old players don't like because it's sold well a few times so far. So if you make a game, try not to do this unless it's the basics of your game. If from the beginning your game or your other thing of media is about crossovers, then feel free to do it. But, it's fine to have some media that's based around that. Like, sort of from the beginning, to a degree, shows like Family Guy had references to pop culture. They actually edged that up a lot over time, but from the beginning, to some degree, they always were like, that's the show I am. And so you're not surprised when you see it. But if you saw, like, all of a sudden some show like Adventure Time or something that has a fantasy world just had some other show's character in it, it would be kind of jarring. And it would make it hard to, like, look back at the show as a whole and have it feel as pure. So, speaking of which, that show is so good. But anyway, I do actually like cartoons. So the fact that I don't want things like SpongeBob on Magic cards isn't because I don't like those things. Most of the things that they are putting in the Universes Beyond are probably interesting, good things. But not every interesting, good thing has to make a cameo in your game, especially if your game is trying to some degree, not just be a mechanical thing, but be a work of art to some degree. Your art now has pop culture cameos. Great. And every, half the sets are crossover episodes. So I don't think that's great for the game, and I think that it represents something happening a lot in culture. Of course, it's not pervasive through all of culture. There's many things that maintain their identity throughout their lifespan. And I know I still hope to write fiction books someday that don't require any pop culture references to work. And if you make some art, that's my recommendation. Unless it's your thing from the beginning. My recommendation is that if you're already making a work of art that doesn't involve pop culture references, think twice before adding them. Especially think twice before, if adding them goes slightly well, deciding half of your thing is going to be them. Think of that in the context of a book series. If you had a book series that was, none of it was like reliant on pop culture, and then over a few years it jumped to half of it being that, you're going to isolate a lot of readers of that series. Anyway, those are just my thoughts. This was a pretty subjective live video. Let me know what thoughts you folks have. I'm looking through some more comments now, and I will look through them in more depth in the future. Anyway, to make some last notes, well, let me get a little more water. It's dark out here. Okay. Some final notes. I'm going to spend the next week or two doing some responding to email type things as well as working on this channel. So, I mean, I'm also going to be filming a Combo Class episode, but on my main Combo Class channel, I rushed out a bunch of episodes one after another, sort of like a week or slightly over a week apart. That was partially because I wanted to put one out before the end of the new year, and then I was just itching to put out this new one. And then now I'm going to let myself have a week or two gap, like have the next one come out like 2 weeks after the one that recently came out. And in that time, catch up this channel a bit, because I've actually filmed a bunch for this channel, and I need to post it. I have a bunch of shorts that I haven't posted and stuff like that. And I also am going to be catching up my Patreon and stuff like that. But I do want to make another really good main channel episode as well, because the Combo Class channel is doing pretty well right now. The last 2 episodes did quite well. That channel is now not only past 50K, but now already past 51K. And the last 2 episodes went quite fast, so you don't know how they'll grow in the future. But the one that's only a couple days old is doing maybe 3 days old now, or maybe 2, I forget. Doing quite well. So that's most of what I wanted to talk about this stream. I guess I will cut it off there. And somebody said someone sent a super chat. Did I see that? If you mean the Hank one, I did respond to the Hank one, so not sure if you heard that. But the person who sent the super chat made some more notes. The Hanko Flamio who left the super chat, who I did mention earlier, now notes the Bible is an anthology of pop culture references. And so of pop culture references, I suppose the Bible was of the era. That's true. Of the era, it had a lot of things like that. But now that there's globalization, it's on a different level, because your references come from all across multiple cultures and multiple franchises now. And so, and back then, if anything else it was based on were other books from a certain region. So that's a little different than, you know, like your card game is based on a video game that could have been made anywhere in the world. And not that it matters where it was made, but that, you know, different cultures have evolved with globalization, mostly for the better. But with your globalization, be careful if you're copying other stuff in a way that waters down your thing and makes you the same as anything else that copies everything else. So the loss of originality in some things, not in everything. There are things that survive. And we also got to note that 51 looks prime, but that has a nickname. It's called the Grothen. I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. Grothendieck or Grothendieck. It's named after this guy because he mistakenly thought it was a prime once, even though he was the type of mathematician that would surprise you. But as you probably know by now, mathematicians are not inherently better at arithmetic. They're just better at problem solving and just have a certain set of knowledge. But that doesn't necessarily relate to like knowing if a number is prime quickly. Except me, if you want to know how to know a prime quickly, look at my episode, How to Easily Calculate If Any 2-Digit Number is Prime. So up to that point, up to the number 120, it's really easy. After that, I haven't explained many techniques. But up to 120, you can know all the primes easy. So never mind what I said about mathematicians, only the ones who haven't seen my episode. Anyway, we have some other cool comments, but can't get to all of them. We are close to an hour, so I think I'm going to wrap up very shortly. Stay tuned for some other stuff on this channel soon. Some shorts I'm putting out in the near future are based on episodes I already made, and partially for that reason, I'm not putting them to subscription feeds or notifications. So you'll see them if you go on the Shorts tab, and you watch a few and you like my stuff, it'll probably show you mine if you're already on the Shorts tab enough. Otherwise, you can look on the Shorts tab of this channel every once in a while. I will be posting some more in the next couple days, but they are somewhat based on some facts from Combo Class episodes I already made. So if you look at the title and you're like, I think he's already told me that, there's a chance of that. They're knowledge that was fun enough, like fun facts of some sort from an episode, that I'm like, even though I already said them in that form, The shorts audience is often a whole different audience than my episodes, and I want them to know the fun facts too. And we got Grotendieck as the pronunciation according to Wade Eberly, or Wade says he thinks. And we have some people saying that it was a pleasure to watch. Thank you all so much for joining me. And I just heard, oh, that's so creepy. I heard someone crawling back there, but it's a cat, I think. Is that a cat? Yeah, that's a cat. Which one is it? Who's that? Which one are you? I can't even see them. Oh, that's Fluffy. That gotta be Dandelion. You know, the funny thing is the other two look so similar. It would have been hard to tell here in the dark which of the other two it was until I looked really close. When I felt some fluff, though, I knew it was Dandelion. Oh, he's so soft because I've been working him with this tool called the Furminator to get all his extra hair out. He has this tool called the Furminator he likes. And so I've been using that on him, and now he's so soft. There was a lot of cat meows, or also known as cameows, in the last Combo Class episode, and I plan on getting more because I trained them to think it's fun to get title cards. I play with them a lot in the yard, and I train them to get title cards I have, so I think it'll be funny to have a title card, and then they jump and get it. I have to be careful, though, because if it's a title card that's crumpleable, they'll crumple it into a ball when they're playing with it. So I have to be careful if I need the title card. I need to make sure I take a good photo of the title card, then play the cat game. Okay, and yes, they are goofballs, as a commenter noted. So that's all for this stream. I will be back related to magic cards in the Worst Magic Cards Ever episode, which will probably be around 3 or 4 episodes from now on the Combo Class channel. There's a couple others planned before that. Make sure you're all tuned into that because it is my main channel, despite not having as many subscribers as this one from the shorts here. But also there is cool stuff coming on this channel in the next week or two also. As usual, I try to at least. And I'll have a cool thing for my Patreon supporters. So if any of you want to consider helping out, there is a Patreon and a YouTube memberships on here. In any case, thank you all for watching, and I love all of you. I will see you again in some other form of content